Boxes are meant for storing various items, basically to keep something inside, or in this case, to keep something contained. These are two oak slab cuts that will be used for this build. Once they are flattened, I can start with 3D carving of the top part of this box. I am using my 3D model of the top part that is now being carved. In a short while, the CNC will finish this carving process. But before I even started 3D sculpting for this project, I had to visualize the design for this whole box. I knew that I wanted some kind of eye in the middle and the rest of the area to have this kind of a underwater temple look. For the sides, I added stone walls with some columns. And to make it more interesting, I added two Moray eels, about which I'll talk about later. This box symbolizes a containment for this mysterious creature, which, as you can see, managed to break through its captor's containment measures. And with one of its eyes, it is looking out to seemingly empty observing area, as if everybody had fled just in time before breaking of this holding structure. It is unknown why this creature has been imprisoned here, but these 4 carved tablets made by the architects of this area might help uncover the perceived origin of this being and how it ended up here. Something happened during the CNC process, which created this unevenness, and at this time I didn't yet know what to do with it, so I set it aside for a while and started with the lower part of this box. The idea for this part is to make an underwater cliff texture, or some kind of a sea rock floor, on which the containment structure will be set upon. Making this in 3D was helpful with determining how deep to carve and how it should roughly look. I spent some time looking at images of underwater cliffs and ruins, and it really puts things into perspective on how deep some of these things are and how incredibly massive the underwater world is. All this research led me to some interesting information about the depths of the oceans, and one of those is about its inhabitants. When it comes to deep-sea creatures, they tend to get very strange, and they are that way for many reasons, such as lack of light and food options, crushing pressure, and overall extremely difficult environment to survive in. And one thing that I found very interesting is that with all these adverse effects that these creatures survive in, is that there is a phenomena called deep-sea gigantism, which is interesting because to me, at first thought, the survival conditions are so harsh that only tiny things would survive in there, if only because of the pressure. But these creatures can get massive for many potential reasons, such as very slow metabolism due to the cold water and needing a lot of energy reserves, which they apparently use very sparingly, and other interesting things, which really shows the survival of the fittest in these extreme environments. When I was thinking about which creature to put on this box, my first idea was Kraken and Leviathan, which are creatures that are pretty well connected to deep waters. But in the end I chose eel, mainly because it looks really cool, mysterious and dangerous. A real underwater menace. Although it is not the strongest underwater creature, but it has that cold predator feeling. Now that the carving and sanding parts are finished, I can move on to the eye. When I was thinking of an interesting eye shape, I knew that I wanted something unusual, and I found out that there are many different eye shapes, specifically pupil shapes, in the animal kingdom, and each serves a specific purpose, whether it is a predator or prey, or to better navigate their environment. For this eye, I decided on a mix between a normal circular and vertical slit pupil. This creature is supposed to look alien, like something that does not belong to this planet, but was somehow connected or discovered in the depths. And that got me thinking that our deep oceans can definitely be scary and unnerving, with all sorts of yet undiscovered creatures, structures and places. But it is interesting to imagine what lives on those planets where there is only water. It makes the imagination run wild, with all the possible and impossible types of creatures lurking in the depths of these ocean worlds. As I was making the design for this box, specifically the sides and the top, it took some time to come up with a general theme and setting. One type of design that always came to mind was the Old Gods style from World of Warcraft, with their dark monolithic structures, which is inspired by Lovecraft's fictional universe, and I remember specifically telling myself to try and come up with something else. But with the huge eye in the middle and the underwater setting, it just automatically shifted towards that style. I mainly wanted to achieve a mysterious atmosphere and keeping it relatively simple in design. I know that I said that this is supposed to be underwater and there is no resemblance of water inside, so let's just imagine that this would be found underwater. Now it's time to put in the metal rods that are supposed to be the main part of this holding mechanism of this cell. As I previously said that this was inspired by the Old God setting, I specifically had in mind their cells, because the old gods were all also alien creatures that were all eventually imprisoned, and they all managed to break out of their containment to a certain extent. And with this, I kind of wanted to capture that feeling of an unknown creature of incredible power that just freed itself from its prison and is finally free and ready to set its plans into motion. In our own world, the depths are still largely unexplored, so the chances of something like this hiding somewhere are extremely low, but never zero. So we should probably be cautious of what we might find there, because it could very well be something unexpected. And who knows, maybe one day we might finally see eye to eye with something truly out of this world.